What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Never Lag Gaming for May. We are back in June about May, as was foretold, as was prophesied, and
So it
uh, and
was
we're here.
written.
So it was written. So it is. So that doesn't really work very well, but
Just like the song goes.
exactly. So we're going to talk about May, everything that happened in May, all the games that we played, um, our thoughts, and anything else that comes along. So thanks for joining us today. I am Levi, joined by the man who fell in the pit, Zach. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. I was trying to finish a game like a few minutes before we did this so that I'd have more to report, but didn't
Classic.
quite didn't quite get there.
Were you up through the entire night
I was up later
trying to
than I
finish
should
the
have been.
game?
Yeah. I was up pretty late.
Okay. I don't know about you, but May was a pretty good month for gaming, if I do say so myself. I had a good time in May. Played a wide swath of um, different genres, different types of games. So
Well, that's
looking
good.
forward to
That's
honestly a lot to talk about.
I'm glad you have stuff to talk about because I do have a few things, but I did not have a ton of gaming time in May. And the first half of May was still Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which we talked about last
Yeah, you
episode.
just
So
replayed Rebirth, didn't you?
I did. I replayed Final Fantasy VII original, Rebirth, remake. No, yeah,
All of 2024.
yeah. Literally the first quarter of the year, like over a quarter of the year, has been Final Fantasy VII, which was fun.
I
But
know.
I'm definitely glad to be
It's
doing
got
this
me
for the.
intimidated, man. I still have Rebirth sitting on the station, the
Well,
PlayStation, and
you know,
I'm
if you don't
afraid to I
replay,
don't know when I'm going to click it because I'm afraid.
if you don't replay the entirety of Rebirth or of Remake, and you don't play the original Final Fantasy VII in its entirety, and you don't also play Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion
Right.
or
Then
whatever
it's
it's called,
only 400 hours.
then you could probably knock it out in about 80 to 100 hours. Unless you want to do all the side stuff, then it's a little more.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's kick things off here. I'll start off with a little tidbit that's like I played it in May, but I kind of fell off towards the end. I did play quite a bit more Destiny at the beginning of May. I was knee deep in the season of something light. Everything they do is named light, so I don't remember what it's.
Light. It's light or dark.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. I was really trying to get a title that was specific to the season before the final shape launched, which is the culmination of essentially 10 years of Destiny that launched
Yeah.
just a day or two ago. Not to tell you how far into June we are, but
Yeah.
um, yeah. So I was trying to get that done, and basically what it was is Destiny's version of a boss gauntlet, um, which I'm a fan of in just about any game. If you've got good bosses, you should have a boss gauntlet. But even weirder in a multiplayer game. But essentially, that's what they did. They took various bosses from different raids and just put them back to back. You went from Golgoroth and King's Fall to the Caretaker in. Actually, I'm not sure what that raid is called because I never did the full raid. And then eventually back to like two bosses later, you'd go back to Oryx. So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, but the whole gimmick was each week it got progressively harder, as in um, your light was 5 below, 10 below, which is your level, your
Mhm.
power level, and they would add a new boss. And so this was 4 weeks of ascending difficulty and adding a boss, culminating in the final week where you have to complete, might have been 6 bosses in a row, 6 or 7,
Yeah.
at minus 15, or no, probably 15 or 20 light. I don't know. Anyways, it got really hard. And I just quite frankly didn't have the time or energy to unless you have a dedicated group that
I was gonna
you can
say
go in
this
there
is
and
like
get
what this
stuff
is a
done.
normal raid, like raiding party size group, right?
Yeah, it's 6 people. So
Yeah.
if you're out there trying to find randoms, I did join a Destiny guild or whatever they're called. And that was nice. I actually was able, I mean, the first 2 weeks were fairly pleasant. Had some people that were competent, knew what they were doing, and we knocked it out. But by week 3, I could tell like this isn't going to be this is going to be a like kind of chisel away at 2 bosses a day over a couple hours, and maybe get a bad group and spend a couple hours doing nothing. So
Yeah.
The other thing to it is to get the title, you had to beat these bosses under a certain time limit. So you didn't just have to
Okay.
beat them. You had a certain time limit, which meant you had to bring the damage. You had to maybe skip a certain phase. So your team had to really be efficient and firing on all cylinders. And as much as I've always wanted to have that dedicated group of 5 people that were just crushing Destiny raids, that's just not ever ever how it's been. So
Yeah.
I tapped out. I tapped out halfway through, um, kind of called it a day. And I still haven't. I never pre-ordered the final shape. I've been hearing really good things about it, and I probably will jump in. But again, I'm just on this like, um, I'm averse. I'm immune to the hype these days. I just don't. I don't get things that
Yeah.
release like I used to. So um, that's what happened with Destiny this month. I had a lot of
Yeah.
fun jumping back in and doing some raids though, because it had been a long time.
Yeah. It is, Destiny raids are fun. It's the scheduling and the timing is just so hard, and that's a
It's
big reason
brutal,
why
man.
it's brutal, and it's a big reason why I fell off the the Destiny wagon. But question about the final shape, do you, like a lot of people are talking about it like this is like the culmination, but maybe the end of Destiny. Like, do you think Destiny? Do they just keep going after this, or like,
I
you know,
so
what's the deal?
based on what I've heard about the final shape, I mean they've introduced a new subclass called Prismatic, and essentially it combines all of the subclasses together, so you can pick and choose from different elements: arc, void,
Mm-hmm.
solar. I forget what the other ones are called, stasis, and then the
Yeah.
green one. I always forget, but like literally you can combine all of them. Um, and to me, that feels like a design decision that you can't come back from.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that this expansion and its seasons are the swan song for Destiny 2. However, I do believe after all of the mess that has been marathon getting delayed, a lot of live service drama at Sony, um, I I really believe Destiny 3 is coming.
Yeah.
I think Sony wants a full-fledged new game they can, put a label on a box and sell. Maybe it's not Destiny 3. Maybe they just go back to calling it Destiny, which they should have done from the start. They should have never,
Yeah.
it should have been an evolving game instead of a sequenced game. But
Yeah.
I think that's
Because
what's
it.
going to happen. I would be really surprised if we get another major expansion for Destiny 2.
Yeah. Well, I guess kind of in that same vein. Sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, but I'm really curious. Like Destiny 3 or Destiny the New Era or whatever you call it. I mean, what is that? Is that just more Destiny? Like is
Yeah, it's always just more Destiny.
like that's what I mean. Like kind
It's
of feels
it's
like
Destiny. It's
it is what
Destiny,
it is.
but about 60% of what you had at the end of the last Destiny. That's how you
Right.
start a new Destiny. You take everything away, you ruin a
Okay.
bunch of quality of life features, and then you spend about 5 to 6 years making it as good as
Yeah.
the previous game.
Do you think this time it's the same thing where you start off and it's a lot of the same content, or do you think this time it's they go like they do something wild and different and new, like a different time, a
I
different
don't
part
think
of the
so.
timeline or different planets or
Oh, different timeline. No,
I don't know.
I think it'll be a continuation. I think they have a plan for the story post Final Shape. They call this the Light and Darkness saga, which is
Yeah.
what it's been. Basically the traveler, and then this mysterious darkness which turned out to be the witness, and kind of an underwhelming villain from what I've gathered. Again, I haven't paid too much attention in recent years. But I do think they have a plan. A lot of the heavies over at Bungie have kind of been, you know, alluding to, teasing the fact that they've got more coming in store. Is that just to, to cope the fan base and make them feel like this isn't the end? I don't know. Um, but they have alluded to the fact that they have story to come. So I think they'll continue from the timeline where they are now.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as the game itself, I sure hope they've learned some lessons from transitioning from D1 to D2. I mean, if you've spent this long, but then again, I don't know if they've learned the lessons I care for them to learn, because I want them to
Yeah.
learn different monetization for their game, which is still a mess.
Yeah. I don't feel like
Um,
they've really taken that taken that to
they
heart.
did say post Final Shape, they are changing the seasonal structure, so there won't, if I understood correctly, there won't be season season pass grinds as there been in the past, which is a huge step forward for me. I really am just done with that in just about every game. Um, but we'll see. I
Yeah.
don't think they changed the formula too much, to be honest, because it's one of people have tried to mimic Destiny for 10 years and no one's been able to hit the way Destiny did. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just maybe fix some of the things that are annoying veteran players that would otherwise come back. So
See, and that's why it kind of feels like this whole Destiny Swan song. Like, is it really? Like, I mean, is that a marketing tactic more than anything? Where it's like, this is the end, the culmination. But okay, now we have new Destiny, and you're gonna start out on like the moon and the Cosmodrome, and and we're gonna. It's like, okay, we're Destiny's still kind of
I
doing
feel
its
like
thing.
I feel like they need to go to a different galaxy if they're going to continue.
I
But I
agree.
don't know. We'll find out in the
That's what I
next year, I
think.
guess. They have said they're going to transition to episodic. How do you say that? Episodic content.
Episodic, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I feel like they need to do something
so I don't
different
know.
because they already did that with D2. It has been 10 years. Like, um, I think they should do something like that, And if they're going to reboot it in some way or call it Destiny 3, where it's like New Destiny, yeah, like let's play. I don't remember the lore very well, but let's play 1,000 years in the past or in the future, or let's play, yeah, planets out. Let's go to Alpha Centauri or something.
Caveman
I don't know.
Destiny.
Caveman,
Primal.
yeah,
Destiny
Neolithic,
Primal.
yeah, Destiny Primal. Yeah, exactly. Where you have to fight with like an
We have to
axe.
we have to fight robot dinosaurs.
It's just a different game. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see where it lands. Like, I still have like feel the siren call of Destiny here and there. I'm like, I want to play it, but it's just
I
such a
know, there's
headache.
nothing
You
like
know,
it.
if they like kind of do like a WoW classic type thing where it's like, okay, Destiny is like stripped down to its essentials, and there's none of this like bloat with all of these expansions and things you have to figure out, and you can just jump in and here's kind of the content, and we're back to square one. Now that I think about it, I actually might play some Destiny if they did that because I wouldn't have to like figure it
Yeah.
out.
I don't know
So
if that'll ever happen at this point. I agree though. Like Destiny needs to just be Crucible, some strikes, and some raids. Like let's get this thing simplified because
yeah,
man, even when you know what you're doing, but especially when you don't, when you come back as a returning player, you log in and it is just a cluster of
yeah,
places to go that don't really make sense and quests that don't really make sense and things you have to do very specifically that aren't really told to you. It's such a maze.
it really is. Yeah.
Anyways, so there you go. There was Destiny. Do you want to talk about when we both played, or I
Um.
don't know? I never know what you're bringing, so
Yeah. You want to talk about another Crab's Treasure?
yeah,
I haven't
yeah. Let's
played a
do
ton
another
of
Crab's
that, but
Treasure.
I've played some, and I know you played. I don't know how much you played of that one. Let's do it.
Yeah, I got the platinum on over on PlayStation, so
Okay. Nice.
pretty easy platinum, not too bad.
Interesting.
Um,
Yeah.
so where are you at? How
Oh,
far into the
still
game?
near the beginning. I'm in like a little past the moon caves, I think. So
Oh, so you haven't even made it to the town.
no, I stopped to Animal Well took over my life, and we'll talk about that more a little later. But
Gotcha.
I've
That's
played
fair.
enough that I can talk about the gameplay and the exploration a little bit, and the feel of the game. But I would love to hear like what are your thoughts on finishing it because um,
Ah,
I know like in our earlier conversations, I feel like we kind of both thought this is pretty good, and that's kind of where it where things lay. So what are your impressions of Another Crab's Treasure having platinumed it?
this is pretty good.
You heard
I
it here,
I kind
folks.
of I kind of went back and forth on this game. Starting
Yeah.
out, I was having a blast. So I would say about a quarter of the way through the game, um, technical difficulties really start to hold the game back. There's an area called, um, oh no, now I'm forgetting what it's called. It's the Kelp Forest. I think that's what it's called. It's after you reach the main town of the game, and then an area called the Sands Between, which is pretty hilarious. Um, but yeah, it's called the Kelp Forest, and it has more foliage than other areas, but this game, it's not a game where you look around and you're like, oh man, how is this running? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a pretty simplistic art style. Um, doesn't look like it would take a lot to run it. So I really think performance is lacking and optimization is needed because that was around the time, you're about a quarter away into the game. That's a really easy time to fall off of a game, even if you were kind of enjoying it. And I almost did. I was struggling. I was still enjoying the game, but it was detrimental enough that I was just kind of like, should I go do something else? Like how bad is this going to
Hmm.
continue to be? I mean, just massive frame stutters, resolution dropping to the floor, just a blurry, choppy mess in the kelp forest, and that was a bummer because it was a cool area. But I pressed on, and it really is mostly that area. There are other isolated occasions where I would get a pretty massive frame drop, or specific areas where there was like clearly something was not rendering properly, and the screen would just stop for like 5 seconds. And you'd have to just hands off the controller because if you kept moving, your character kept moving, but your screen was frozen for like 5 seconds.
Hmm.
That happened probably 2 or 3 times after that in certain parts of the game. And I noticed that it was consistent in those parts of the game too. So, like if you went back and went to that same spot, it would do it again. So,
Interesting.
optimization definitely needed. Um, as far as just a gameplay mechanics, I think they did a really good job. I think it feels good to play. Um, it it brings kind of some new mechanics, not necessarily new, but its own little twist on some very tropey Souls things. And I think they did a good job. It's a really nice. I don't even know if it's. I guess it's definitely more of a kids game. Um, but I think they did a good job with it. I think
A
it's a
challenging
fun.
kids game. Like,
Yeah, I think it's a fun, weird Souls game. Like we talked
yeah,
about last
yeah,
month. It's nice to be able to play a game like this that is tonally completely different, and it is. I mean, the writing is sometimes over the top, weird, and zany, but also there were some genuinely funny moments in writing
yeah.
and characters that I enjoyed. So overall, I enjoyed this game. Is it a must play in my opinion? No. I'd give it a good old probably 7 out of 10, 7.5. Surprisingly, this game is longer than I thought. It had the Liza P effect where like I thought I was at the final mission, final thing, and it went on another quarter of the game length.
Yeah.
It just a whole new 2 areas, which I was like full fledged 2 areas after I thought it was the end of the game.
Yeah.
Um, but those were some of the coolest areas, honestly. So at first I was kind of like, this is really hanging around. This is long in the tooth here. And then you get into it and you come to terms with, oh, the game didn't end. And the final areas are actually really cool. There were quite a few boss fights I really enjoyed. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts based on what I've said at this point? I'm kind of rambling, but I'm trying to articulate
Yeah.
how I
No,
felt about it.
my feelings are similar. Having only played like the first couple bosses and um, only been to a couple areas so far. I like it. 7 out of 10 feels right. I think for a studio's first game, like the combat is pretty good. It's pretty finely tuned. Like for a Souls game where your hit windows and dodge windows all have to be um, you know, uh, tailored pretty well, and you want to make sure that those aren't too big or too small. They did a pretty good job with that. Like the combat is challenging, like any good Souls game. Like you can't just button mash or whatever. Like you have to be strategic and make sure you're attacking and blocking and doing all the right things at the right time. Um, I think some of the mechanical twists they added, like having your shell be all these different things, added kind of a fun element where it's like, okay, right now my shell is a soda can, but there's like this little bottle cap that will make me lighter and faster, but it won't give me as much protection. So there are some fun elements there. Like you said with the writing, at times it felt like a little bit too much over the top, but at other times it's been funny, and I am enjoying it. The
Yeah.
biggest issue I have with the game, like I have technical. Let's talk technical for a second. Haven't had any major issues, but I haven't got to the kelp forest yet, so I'll let you know when I get to that how it runs on Steam Deck. But I imagine if it has those issues, they're probably going to have some of those issues too, for me. Um, but yeah, I think one of the biggest problems I just have with this game is it just didn't grab me super hard, which it's good. It's not bad. I do want to play more of it. It's just I got distracted by other things. Like Animal Well came out and I started that as well, just to that game seemed so weird. I was like, let me try it. And then that game just kind of swept me away. So it's not a game that'll probably like just
I
fully
don't think it'll
capture
sweep
you.
you away. Yeah, no.
Yeah, and so if you don't really have much to play and you want something kind of fun, you want a Souls like, this is great. If you have some other games you're really excited about that are looming on the pile, then maybe don't start this because it might you might get pulled away from it. And that's kind of the problem I have. Is I was playing this near the beginning of the month. Now here we are, in June, and I am gonna probably gonna go back to it, but um, I'm gonna have to get back into the flow of it a little bit as well. So it's good. Yeah, I feel like for a first game, they did a pretty good job. I hope they learn some of the issues with it. I hope they learn for whatever their next game is.
Yeah.
And I do like having a Souls game that tonally is so weird. Like you said, a lot of the Souls alternatives, besides like FromSoft games, are still kind of dark and fantasy esque. And it's fun having like a SpongeBob Bikini Bottom feeling game that has some challenging combat for you to play. Like it is a nice palate cleanser if you still really want something that has that Souls like challenge. So
Yeah.
good, not
I want to
great.
call out a few things that something that you mentioned, but just things the game does well. The shell system. I didn't think I was gonna like that based on just seeing it in previews and things, but I think it overall it works really well, and it's kind of you end up finding your favorite shells, and there's a system where you can keep that shell after you die if you pay for insurance or whatever.
Oh,
So
okay.
you end up getting a shell that you like, but if it breaks, you're running around finding another shell, and I don't know, it worked. It was a unique twist, and
Mm-hmm.
it was very thematic, and I think it worked really well. The level design I thought was really good in this game. Actually, I thought they did a really good job of explorable areas, secrets. There were several times in this game where I was just continuing. The story was telling me to go do this thing, and I would just continue exploring, and it would just keep going. And there was no reason for me to keep going other than that I was just continuing to explore, and it would lead to another area, and a boss that you would never encounter if you just followed the story.
Mm-hmm.
So stuff like that was really cool. I thought they did a really good job with just locations and area design and things like that. The upgrade systems I thought were really good and I enjoyed. I really do. I'm preferential toward a Sekiro type upgrade system and game design where I've heard some people say, "Oh, I wanted to be able to find different weapons around the world and try different stuff." I don't really care. I like getting your one weapon, getting some enhancements or different abilities, and just really refining that gameplay style. Which I'm also glad they did because I feel like this team is a small team and they probably bit off more than they could chew. And I can't imagine if they'd have tried to implement different
Yeah.
weapons and builds like that. So there was a point in the game where you get an ability. You can unlock an ability to the things that you would normally use as shells. You can stab them with your fork, and then you get a big hammer. And basically, each hit damages the shell, your hammer, in the way that it would if you were taking damage. And so when it's fully depleted of its armor, it breaks
Mm-hmm.
and you have to get another one. But that was an interesting twist because I was like, oh, there's one weapon in this game, but really, if you like that playstyle, you can get trinkets that build your damage for hammers, and you can have a completely different playstyle that's a lot slower and heavier hitting, which I'm a big fan of giant hammers in games. So I thought
Yeah.
just having those two options alone, I felt was plenty,
Mm-hmm.
and even brought some dynamism, or like it was just interesting because sometimes you don't have a hammer, so you're playing a quicker, more agile play style, and then sometimes you do have a hammer and you're doing slow, heavy hits. I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was really well designed. Man, I'm trying to think of what else. There are quite a few things that they did really well, and for I guess it's not their first game. We talked about this last time. It might be their second, but I don't know what their
Oh, okay.
first game was. But overall, for a small team, I think they did a great job. I'm sure they probably needed to get this out the door because it had taken longer than they had ever thought. But I do wish it had been better optimized. Maybe they'll get to that in the future. But from that, you should be able to tell if you're interested in it. I mean, really, it's not an unmissable game, but it is a good game. It has good content, good level design, some pretty good bosses. And if you look at the art style and you go, "Oh man, that looks really fun to me," then you should probably jump in and check this out. If it's kind of a take it or leave it on the art style, then there's Souls games are a dime a dozen these days. So hopefully that'll offer some direction
Yeah,
for any of you out there who are considering.
cool. So that's another Crab's Treasure. What's something else you got? What else did you do this month?
All right, let's go to one of my headliners, man. This is going to be a little bit of a surprise, but I went back to Forbidden West at the beginning of May.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Um,
I've
I
been
had
meaning to get
purchased,
to that game this year. So,
yeah, I had purchased the DLC sometime last year. So that had been sitting there, and ironically, it's still on my hard drive. But the impetus of this whole decision was it's a pretty big game, and I was like, all right, I should. This is just sitting here. I got to finish the DLC so I can delete this off my PlayStation.
right.
Um, Still haven't deleted it, but that's why I started it. And man, I gotta say, I've come a long way from 2021. Is that when this game came out?
22.
2022.
It's 22.
Is that when it was when Elden Ring came out, right?
Yeah.
That was
Yep.
two. Okay,
That was
come a long
2022.
way. If you've been with us, you know I spent an entire year complaining about Forbidden West. It launched pretty poorly, and even more so if you consider the expectations from a first-party Sony developer. So
That's all we
I
talked
spent
about
a
for a
year.
couple of months, it felt like.
I know. You should be proud and happy about how quiet I've been about Rebirth.
You've grown. Yeah.
I've grown. No, I spent a year complaining about it, and then I finally got to it, and I really enjoyed my time with it. It was kind of landed on, hey, this is PlayStation's Ubisoft game, basically.
Yeah.
Is it a
Yeah.
bit better in some ways? Is it a bit worse in some ways? Really, and I still feel that way. But I, after finishing the DLC, I gotta say, it's still close. But man, the good in this game is so good. I do wish that they could tighten up. Like, I mean, in 2017 we got Origins, and you could climb anything. You know, same with
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild. And for some reason, that technology just has not reached Guerrilla Games, and I don't know why. And it's very frustrating to like some areas feel like you're playing a game from the early 2000s. In some areas you can climb. It's just very weird.
Yeah.
Um, there's other things that are just kind of odd. I don't love the ragdoll effect. Um, might talk about this a little bit later, but like when your character gets hit and then you spend the next 5 seconds not being able to control them, that never feels
Yeah.
in any game.
No, that's really frustrating.
I set foot into Forbidden West because when you get hit, Aloy gets thrown across the map and you spend 5 seconds rolling and getting back up, and it's just feels bad. But yeah, I started the DLC. It's called Burning Shores, and it takes you near Hollywood, which is basically now an island separated from what I assume is the main continent and California. And it's basically overrun by a volcano, and there's lots of lava. That's the whole skybox, not skybox, but like design concept behind the area.
Yeah.
And there were just so many cool moments in this DLC. I thought the story was captivating. I enjoyed the villain. I enjoyed the companion character that Aloy gets, and I do feel that they made progress with Aloy as a character, whether it's Aloy herself or this character that she was bouncing off of. It felt more engaging than Aloy typically is. Um, so I enjoyed all the story components. The locations that you get taken to throughout this island are very memorable. There are at least two or three, and there's one or two things I still have yet to do because I got sidetracked after completing the story. There's still some like pretty cool optional things I have yet to do that I've been kind of saving for the right night because things got a little busy there.
Hmm.
But the locations are just so cool. And then when I take a step back and I look at all the locations in this DLC and then add that to the locations from the base game, they really knock it out of the park when it comes to, I don't want to say skyboxes again, but kind of skyboxes and just, I don't know. I can't think of a better word.
Ground boxes,
Ground
floor
boxes. There you go.
boxes,
Floor
box
boxes,
boxes. All of the boxes are
mountain boxes,
triple A. Yeah.
river boxes. No, yeah, they just do an awesome job. The locations in Forbidden, I love the first game because it takes place in Colorado, and it takes you up to Yosemite, and like
Finally, some
Mile
video
High
game
Stadium is
representation.
there.
I know. I know.
It's just cool to see that
It's
because that's
cool.
where we're
Yeah.
from. But the sequel, man, the locations are, it just takes you to some of the coolest spots that are very diverse different
Yeah,
biomes. And then again, there's just some really cool, even gameplay moments in the DLC where you you get a new flying mount that has a really cool mechanic that makes sense for the story, but then also is just super freaking cool. Like it's just
yeah,
really cool, and it's just one of those moments where you're like, "What a cool idea! I can't believe that they just did that. Like that's just a cool video game idea."
they made it happen.
Um, so I had a blast with it, man. I don't know where else to go with it, but
I will
I look
say,
back at the yeah. Go ahead.
you're convincing me to pick that up because I'm kind of thinking like I'm trying to finish up Stellar Blade. We'll talk about that in a minute too, but I'm starting to think about like what's my next PS5 game that I'm gonna play, and I have a few things sitting on there that I need to get to. But I've wanted to play Forbidden West since it came out. I played the first 5 hours and then got sidetracked, I think by Elden Ring, and I never got back to it. And I really want to because I love the franchise. And now that you've had like a relatively good experience with it overall, like I want to get to it. And every time you talk about it, I'm like, oh, I feel
Yeah,
like I've missed out on like one of the important games of the PS5 generation. So it's good
I
to
would
hear
say
that the DLC
absolutely.
is
I
good.
would say that Forbidden West is a must play if you know, if you are big on those big Sony experiences. This is that.
You know me.
You have to accept the short the short not shortfalls, not downfalls either, shortcomings. You have to accept the shortcomings. It does have some things that are frustrating and just feel a little underpolished. Um, but if you can go into it thinking this is PlayStation's Ubisoft, you know, for better or worse, or they did some things
Yep.
better, some things worse, I think that really helps. And expectation played a big role. I had to reset my expectations over the course of a year. It still is not the best looking game. Their engine's still, I just feel like the Decima engine they're using is not as good as others. It just feels kind of grainy a lot of the time. But that said, there still are moments. I took tons of screenshots. It still is a good
Yeah.
looking game in its own right. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it
but
feels like
it's
there's
well
moments that
worth.
look really good, and then there's
Yeah,
also moments that should look a lot better. And they try and use some of these like very visual moments to like make you feel like it looks good, but there are other moments where you can kind of see the seams of everything a little bit. But yeah,
yeah. And controlling Aloy is still a little janky when it comes to platforming. I think that's one of the other things that feels not great. Um, I have some hilarious videos of her climbing things and stuff, but you know, if you can see past that, this is very much a top tier experience as a whole, and just a must play game for sure. And then I forgot to mention, but the end of the DLC has one of the most epic boss fights of just like almost any game, just set piece moments. It's
nice.
crazy, dude. And I remember hearing that from I think Blessing from Kind of Funny had mentioned something about it, and I was like, oh, interesting. I wonder what that's going to be like. And sure enough, man, it was a very scenic, epic moment. Crazy stuff happening. Um, Things that feel like they should be more scripted than they really felt. You know, which is cool
Yeah,
because that's kind of where we got into video games, or where we should be,
yeah.
where we can have these moments that in years past would have had to have been very scripted, and now they
Hmm.
can feel a lot more dynamic, and you are playing the game. Really cool ending, and at the end of it all, just looking back and thinking, man, what a good game. I hope that next time around they can iron out some of these kinks, but I probably won't hold my breath because I think it is what it is at this point, and we just need to readjust expectations on some of those things that can be frustrating and appreciate um, what a cool world. I was running around. This is the other thing. I was running around this game in the DLC, and just thinking, not this is going to come across really disparaging to Xbox, and I guess it kind of is, but like just really grateful that this is a real game that came out, that exists. We get to explore this world. We get to see this world. It happened, and it's real, and it's pretty dang good. And just you know, it's Xbox has struggled to do that. I think back to they had some dragon game that got canceled forever ago that someone was super
Oh
or everyone
yeah,
was super
I
excited
vaguely
about.
remember that. Yeah, forgot what it
Yeah,
was
and I'm
called.
just like, man, this could have easily not existed depending on the publisher or the
Yeah.
platform or whatever. And despite its faults, I'm just so glad that it exists, and it's such a cool, unique world. Being running around tribal Earth with robot dinosaurs, um,
in
is just a cool
post-apocalyptic
concept.
scenic areas in the
Yeah,
US. Like, I
and it
agree.
exists. So I'm
I
glad.
agree.
I'm glad for that.
See, that kid's is maturity, because I think the longer you you observe and like be a part of the game industry, you do realize like how hard it
Maybe
is to
that's
get
it
any of
too.
these projects off the ground. And I'm
Yeah.
finding that too, where it's like, wow, it's so cool. That's kind of how I feel about Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, where I'm like, there are some big flaws with those games, but there are some amazing things. And it's like, the fact that this exists and it happened and it's as good as it is honestly like they're threading a needle of near impossibilities. And so it sounds like that's kind of what it's like for Forbidden West too. And if you think about it, like some of the cool game pitches of like, what if you're like tribal, but it's a post-apocalyptic world and there are robot dinosaurs and you gather their parts. Like, that's the type of thing you'd talk about as a kid that sounds so cool that like, how would they ever do it? And they did it. And
Right.
even if it's
Then you
not
get in a
perfect, like,
boardroom and they're like, whatever, shut up.
right. And they're like that's going to take way too much money. And so
Right.
it's cool that it exists. I love the first one. I really liked the first 5 hours I played. Very glad to hear Burning Shores is a good DLC, because I also paid for it. So you're kind of giving me
Yeah.
the itch to pick that up sooner rather than
There's
later.
my 2 cents. If you haven't gotten to it and you wanted to, bump it to the top. It doesn't have to be the next thing you play, but bump it to the top of your backlog, I would say. And don't
Messenger
sleep on the
Seeds.
DLC.
Yeah.
Don't don't forget about
I'll
the
probably
DLC
just
because
do them
I
together.
honestly,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean I think the DLC is best played after the campaign.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. I'll do them back to
But
back probably. But
yeah. But just don't forget about it because man, I honestly think it was the best part of the game. The best
wow.
content was in the DLC. So
Nice.
crazy stuff.
Yeah. I
Glad I
kind of
went
like
back
when
to
that
it.
happens with DLC, because then it makes it feel like
I
this
know
is
it's
really
like,
justified. Like,
and you know what? I kind of had this different moment where DLCs can feel so different depending on how they happen or when they happen or how good they are. You
yeah,
know, they can feel like content was taken out of the game or like this was just a money grab or whatever.
this is yeah,
But
yeah,
when they hit like this and you get to go back to a game that you enjoyed and the content's even better, DLC is so cool to have just like
yeah.
a 5 to 8 hour experience of just like premium content from a game you loved. And we get this a
Hmm.
lot with FromSoft. Theirs are always so good.
Just what I
This
was thinking
was
of.
this was of that
Yeah,
jump, of that quality. Like it felt like a FromSoft DLC in that like everything culminated in this really delectable piece of smaller content that just is the cherry on top of the game. So DLC
yeah.
can be really cool when it hits like that.
It's great when the game is already really good and then the DLC is somehow better. Like, that's how the Blood
The Blood Bunny.
Born. Just having a stroke, kids. uh, that's how that's how the Bloodborne DLC is, where it's like the core game is great, and then you get into the old hunters, and by the end of that, you're just like, oh my gosh, like it's taking everything Bloodborne to 11, and
Yeah.
by the end it was like, this is the cool. You have to play the DLC, but I'm glad I played it after I did everything else in the game, and so
Yeah.
anyway, excited to hear that Burning
Yeah,
Shores
throw
is
it on
good.
your watch list. You can get the DLC on sale for like $10 these days, so easily, easily
Yeah,
worth it. I had a
easily worth it.
blast. It was honestly, it might have been my favorite thing I played this month. Which, in a month of, I had a good time this month. So it was
Yeah.
really, it's one of my favorite things I've played this year is this DLC. So
Wow. Cool.
um, had a lot of fun with it. So do you want to do Animal Well, or you got something else you want to throw in before that?
Maybe I'll do Stellar Blade first,
Oh, you want to do
because
Stellar Blade first? Okay.
I'm not. Yeah, did you play Stellar Blade?
So I'm a bit into Stellar Blade.
Okay.
I don't know
Yeah,
how
let's just
far
do that.
I've. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts? What are your impressions? Where are you at?
So I think I'm about halfway. I looked at like the walk through like sections and kind of matched up where I'm at, and I'm like right at the halfway mark. Um, I I'm liking it a lot. There are some downsides to it too, but yeah, Stellar Blade is pretty cool. The combat is just really fun to play. It's I halfway into the game, I'm really still enjoying like the feel of it. In some ways, it feels a little bit from soft, but it also feels like a more action. you know, Devil May Cry style. Like there's a little bit of that hack and slash mixed into it, but it's enough balance. It's balanced enough with like needing to block and dodge and like do some of the right um, Souls like dance movements
Rock,
in
paper,
combat.
scissors.
Right. There's the rock paper scissors element that just makes it a really good blend. And um, it's a lot of fun to play. There's really cool abilities you unlock later on. I don't know exactly how far you got, but you get a decent amount of abilities as you continue on. Um, and it just I want to keep like fighting bosses and doing this stuff. However, um, I think a lot of the locations are a little bit drab, and so I'm finding myself not enamored with some like the locations fairly often. But like the combat's good enough that it pulls you through it. And the story is kind of take it or leave it. I think it's kind of whatever. There's some other issues too, like the other than like one or two main characters, the voice acting can be kind of rough at times. It's a lot of little things like that that kind of add up to if the combat wasn't so good, and if the performance is good too. If the combat and performance weren't really good, this game would very much be like a I don't know, maybe like a 6 out of 10 type thing. Like it was like not bad, but not very good. But the combat and the performance of it, um, and some of the aesthetic, like they lean into a specific aesthetic, which I think mostly works. Those things pull this up to like a 7.5. I think maybe at times I felt like this is like an 8 out of 10. Um, but it's cool. I think it's a worthwhile game for a studio's first game of like this caliber. It's pretty impressive. I think if you like Souls style games, you should absolutely check this out. Um, yeah, at this point, I'm kind of rambling. The last thing I'll say is like, there's a lot of interesting things around like outfits and aesthetics, which sometimes is fun and sometimes makes me feel like I'm gonna get in trouble. Like I'll craft a new outfit I just unlocked, and it's like super scantily clad, and then my wife walks in and she's like, "What are you? What's going on in here?" And um, so there's a little bit of that factor to it, but
It's a triple A
overall,
game, I swear.
yeah, no, this is yeah, it's not what you think. Um, anyway, it's cool. Some of the bosses are pretty neat. I'm curious to see by the end of it how I feel about like enemy variety and stuff, but there's been a decent amount of enemies and bosses. Um, and I think this is worth playing if you like Souls games. Like 7.5 to 8 out of 10. We'll see how I feel at the end of it. But yeah, what do you think about what you've played of Stellar Blade?
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said hit home for me. Early on, I was really, really enjoying my time. I thought that this game was, I mean, 8.5 out of 10. But ultimately, I do think that if you take the combat, the enemy design, and just overall performance, easily 8.5 out of 10. But then if you remove those things, everything else is definitely 5 to 6 out of 10.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that becomes more apparent the further you get into the game. I think I'm hoping
I
that
agree.
things return a little bit to the formula to start the game, because I think that this game, its weaknesses are much less apparent when it is very linear. And I was
Yes,
really
I'd agree with
enjoying
that.
the level design and the linearity of the beginning, because really all you want to do is fight stuff. You want to fight creatures, you want to fight bosses, maybe a little bit of exploration, or like, oh, what's that little path here? But very much more akin to a Souls game where it's linear. It has a couple branching paths, but pretty much it's linear. But I had gotten to now I am in the desert area after
Yeah,
reaching the town of Zion, and reaching the town of Zion was cool. That whole set piece and moment, what a cool town! I was really enjoying that. But once you go out into the desert, oh, that location is so bad. It's just bad, and I agree with you. I can't report beyond that because that's where I still am.
yeah.
But what a boring location, and all of the flaws really start to shine when you create a semi-open world area, because it just feels like a game from the early 2000s. It's like there's this big barren empty map with enemies that were just kind of dropped around,
Yeah,
and some things to find but not real. Like it's just
There's a
my
chest.
enjoyment
You just run for
my
10
enjoyment
seconds,
has
open a chest.
has
Yeah.
tanked a lot in this area, and I need to get out of it because it's really tanked my enjoyment being in this somewhat open world area.
Yeah.
I want to get back to. And the other thing is too is I'm exploring around. I'm trying to find different upgrades and whatever, and I found two bosses or whatever in this area, and they've been reskins of previous bosses.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's going to be an ongoing theme, but it's a bummer because it's like, oh, I found this secret area that leads to a boss chamber area. Oh, it's literally one of the two bosses I've fought already, like again.
Yeah.
And the first time, you're like, holy crap, what a cool boss. What amazing boss design. The enemy design in this game is so cool. It's
Yeah.
just, it just is leaking coolness. Like every every aspect of it is just awesome. I do love the design of those things. Um, but it definitely has some shortcomings that I'm starting to notice. And I'm hoping that, I mean, does it continue this more open area style from here, or does it revert back to more of a linear type level design of the beginning?
Yeah, it has more linear areas because I had the same issue. The desert was really boring, just aesthetically, but also, like you said, the way it was designed, it was equally like open and barren, but also like a convoluted maze somehow. Like I don't know
Yeah,
how to convey that, but
it's a
I
nightmare, dude. I
I
hate
did
it.
most of the stuff in the desert. I don't know why. Like I spent this
That's how
one.
I feel. I'm like
I spent
80%
like
of the way through the desert, and I'm like, I got to figure out where to go to not do this. Like, where is the
yeah.
main progression?
The problem is it makes it hard to figure out how to make like do the main progression without doing everything because of the layout. Like it, so it's like it is a convoluted maze, like a fun house, and it's like not just like horizontal paths. It's like there's a lot of verticality, and so
Yeah,
the way I had to explore it to get to the next big story beat in it, like at the end of the desert. But I like by the nature of that, I did almost everything in the desert anyway, and I was so sick of it. And then there was a cool boss fight at the end, and it kind of led to the next story beat. And there, like after that, you go. After that, you'll return to Zion, and then there's some other things where it's like these linear missions. I've gone on a couple linear missions that at times are still a little bit drab, but they're better because it is like the Souls. You have a corridor, branching path or two. You're fighting enemies. You're figuring out, oh, this unlocks that door, so I now have a shortcut. Like that kind of Souls
yeah.
exploration loop that is just inherently satisfying. Oh, cool! I unlocked the
That
door. I
and
now have a
that and
shortcut, and I have
the
yeah,
enemy placement feels more purposeful in those areas. Where in the desert,
yeah.
it just feels like like there's just crowds of enemies, and you're constantly trying to fight 4 or 5 enemies, which is not what these games are made for.
No, and you have to like bait some of them away so you don't get like
Yeah, it just doesn't
massacred, and
feel great.
it just
So
it just takes too much time, and it doesn't highlight the fun parts of the game. So you will get more linear experiences and more boss fights, and some of those things are better to varying degrees. There's some really cool boss fights that I've been through since then. And every time I have one of these big like boss, there's some really cool like set piece cinematic action moments kind of in between that happen that feel like a little bit uncharted mixed with like a huge boss fight, and
oh,
those
cool.
things are really are pretty cool. And so I've really liked that, but it's a little bit of a slog in between those things, and that's why I'm having trouble recommending it. It's also I'm having trouble like you know I think finishing the game is there just these pockets where you feel mired down in this experience, and enough of the other pieces aren't very good, and so that also weighs it down. And I think there
Yeah,
are
it's
some
kind of
other
like
games.
it's reminding me a bit of, and this is honestly apropos of other comparisons with the game, but like a little bit of Final Fantasy remake vibes where it's just
I
like
was just gonna go there. That's
it's got
uh,
really good moments, but man, does it make you work for them. Like there's just a lot of time wasted in between, and then all
yeah.
of it leads you feeling like, would you replay this game ever? No. Like
But the
was
see
it
the
fun, but would you replay it? I don't know. That's kind of how I
as
feel.
someone who replayed Final Fantasy VII
That's
Remake,
true. You
no,
did. You did.
and I've so what I was literally going to make the same comparison, but for the I think the opposite reason you made it, and that's because with Final Fantasy VII Remake, at the very least, sometimes you'd go through this like boring slog portion, but you would have the charm of the characters, where it's like, okay, I still get to
That's
see
true.
Cloud and Tifa and Aerith
Yeah,
interact.
it's true.
Some of these things were a little more skippable in Final Fantasy VII, not always, but it's like the charm of the world and the story was so compelling where it's like, okay, this was kind of boring, but I feel so invested in like, are we going to save Sector 7? It are,
For
is
sure.
Cloud falling for Aerith? Like
The writing and voice acting in this game is very not good.
and
for
it
the
gets, I
most
feel like
part.
it gets worse.
Does it get
Like
worse? Yeah,
the writing just,
it's
it kind of goes.
comically bad, the writing. Like there's
Yeah,
interactions with characters where you're just like,
yeah.
what?
And
What was that?
the voice acting for Eve is pretty good. Like she has a, like, just kind of a suave
I
British
think
accent.
so,
It's
yeah.
great.
Even
And there's
Adam's
like
not
one or
bad.
Adams, he's okay. Like he's not bad, not good, I would say. Um, and like that the first girl you meet at the beginning, I'm forgetting her name. She, like, her voice was cool, but most of the other characters are varying levels of bad. And a lot of the side characters you'll talk to, there's a few where it's just like, oh, please stop talking.
Yeah.
Um, but I think beyond like the voice acting, the story is feels pretty generic. And the way the story is delivered is very just exposition heavy. Like it's just kind of boring. And then that with the world feeling so dreary, like, the desert's boring, but a lot of the other places are kind of, it's everything's just dull and drab. And so all of those things compounded with getting bored with these areas, like it makes it hard to get through at times. But then you'll hit a boss fight or an epic moment where you're like, this
Yeah.
is really cool. And so there's just enough of that it's kept me going through
It's
it.
it's frustrating because
Yeah.
like they have some really good components,
Yeah.
and then they've really weighed it down with a lot of weird design decisions and lower quality bars on certain parts of the game,
Yeah.
which is frustrating because there's
I
parts
would
here that
guess.
are very redeeming. And go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And I was just saying, I would guess that it feels like they're trying to make this game bigger and more epic. Like this has an open world components. This has all of these side missions and characters to talk to. And it's one of those classic things where I feel like they bit off more than they could chew in the time that they needed to
Maybe.
deliver. And I think if they had focused on just make this a series of linear experiences, maybe you stop back at
Yeah.
Zion for a couple of things here and there. Maybe that could have helped. But I don't
Well,
know.
we'll see. I got to get out of this desert, man. Yeah, it's really. I'm just like, oh,
It's
I
rough.
hate this game right now.
It's worth,
Um,
I would say, get through the desert, play a couple more of like the story beats after that, because I'd be curious to hear what you think as you continue.
yeah.
Um, that being said, I was playing it pretty actively for a while, and then I got sidetracked by Animal Well, which has been my obsession for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. Um, and it feels hard to go back because as much as I love like the combat, I'm like, I don't, where am I, like, what do I need to be doing? And now I'm hearing all these great things about Forbidden West, so we'll see. I do want to finish the main storyline, but at the same time there are enough problems that it's hard for me not to like
Yeah.
hear the call of another game.
I do very much want to finish the main storyline because mostly the bosses. I want to see all the bosses
Yeah,
in this game. It's crazy how much this area that I'm in has tanked my enjoyment because up until this area, I was having a blast. I'm like, man, this is such a
same,
good
yeah.
game. This is like a, Sony knocked it out of the park grabbing this game. This feels like a Sony exclusive game. And then I got to this desert area and I'm like, I hate this game. I never want to touch this game again. So it's like it's crazy how quickly it devolved for me.
Yeah,
I'm gonna push through. I want to continue, and the great thing is they've added a boss rush mode,
they do have a
which
boss rush. Yeah,
thank goodness this game more than any game needs a boss rush mode because that's the best part of the game, and the rest is there's a big quality gap in the rest of the
yeah,
content. So um, it will be great to be able to, if I can finish this game, just be able to go back and play some of the boss fights that I really like or whatever, because they are very
yeah.
cinematic, very cool looking. The animations are awesome. Oh, one last thing I do want to complain about: games, third person action games. It feels bad when your character controls too realistically. And the platforming and moving Eve around in this game does not feel good. The
I
combat
agree.
feels
Yeah,
mostly good, but like there'll be so many times where you're like standing on a car or a smaller object and you're trying to like turn Eve around to jump to grab something or whatever, but she won't, it's unrealistic, but it's a video game. Most games, you think of Dark Souls, you can like spin in place on a dime.
yeah,
It's very easy to control your character. There's no weight to their movement or whatever. They've added a lot of weight and inertia to her movement, and it's so frustrating when you're trying to navigate tighter areas. And then
totally
you
agree.
combine that with the fact that it has the horizon problem of um, interacting with objects and platforming feels very janky a lot of the time and not fluid. Um, that's another aspect that's dragging it down a little bit for me. But
Well, I mean, that needs to be realistic because if you look at Stellar Blade, it's a very realistic
it's very
game
realistic.
across all
Yes,
its dimensions. Like, now, Stellar Blade is like so over the top ridiculous that it feels like, why wouldn't you? Like, you know,
it's just a
it's
bad design decision because it doesn't feel good.
right, and it doesn't match up with like a lot of their other
Yeah,
decision design decisions.
they
Anyway,
needed. You
so
know what they needed? They needed that inertia for the physics. You know, the body physics.
yeah,
That's what it was. They were like, we
yeah.
can't. We have to make this very realistic so that everything can jiggle around. So
They're like they're we'll take a hit if that jiggle is there. Like it's
if the
you may
jiggle's
not
there,
enjoy
it's
your
worth it.
that's actually why the desert is there too. They're like, we have some scantily clad outfits, and if it's not hot and you're not lost in a wasteland, you're not going to put on
Right?
those
She
other
couldn't
outfits.
possibly be wearing this in a frozen tundra, so this has to be
Right, exactly.
because we're going for realism here.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, how much farther than me do you think you are from the desert area? Like double?
Yeah, maybe. Um, it's weird because it's not. I don't think it was like another big open area after that. It's been like a series of several linear ish things.
Oh, thank goodness.
Um, so it does in some ways gets better after that. So yeah,
Well, there you have it.
yeah, yeah. I'm about
Very
halfway.
mixed opinions.
I would say I would say you're like a quarter of the way, and I'm about halfway into the game ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess we'll find out. I do think I will finish it. I'm not gonna. It's the game I'm playing right now,
Mm-hmm.
other than something else we'll talk about in a minute. But
Ooh.
it is the single player, the more linear game I'm playing right now. So I'll probably
Right.
finish it unless something really takes me away, and I don't know what that would be right now. So,
Yeah.
um, Animal Well.
We could do that unless you got other stuff. Animal Well is the last game I played, so
Let's
it'll
talk
be
about Animal Well. I've got something to wrap things up, but yeah, I want
cool.
to talk about Animal Well because Animal Well
Let's
is
do it.
surprises and delights, and just one of those games that probably wasn't on just about anyone's radar, and then
Yeah,
kind of had its zeitgeist moment and took off, and I think very deserving. I think this game
I would
is
agree. Yeah.
um, it's a weird game. It's not going to be for everybody, but I do think it's a masterpiece in its own right. And simply put, I think that Animal Well reminded me of what I am passionate about when it comes to game design and kind of where I started. I told you this earlier in the month, but in high school, there was a online game, not so much a game, almost like a program that you could make your own levels, and it was called Freerider. If anyone out there remembers this, but you had a little guy on a bike, and you could create lines and jumps and all different things, and then you know different collectibles throughout it, and then an endpoint, and then you could save it and have people play it. And I've got on a hard drive somewhere, um, like large paragraphs of code that if copy and pasted into that program will generate these levels. And I made like 20 of them and spent a lot of time doing it. And just they got really elaborate and really intricate. And I don't know, just it's different because it's not a puzzle game, but this game reminds me a lot of if I had been able to um, continue on that and like continue to work on that, or had a class or had really pursued it. This feels like something I would have made. Probably not this good, honestly, but it's just the kind of game design that I really like, where it's just a sandbox and you have certain tools or certain things, and the player just kind of has to play the game and figure stuff out and interact with things. And so many games these days, I love so many games these days, but very few games really just focus on that, on just a little sandbox. I don't know if The Witness really qualifies, but there's just not a lot of games that are like this. And so playing this was such a blast from the past and a breath of fresh air. And just I really did. I kind of had that moment where I'm like, man, this is what I'm actually passionate about when it comes to game design. If I were to go in and start making a game, these are the pillars and fundamentals that I would probably start with, because I think they are the most like wondrous things, just getting in there and exploring a sandbox someone made. So
Yeah.
um
You know,
by the
it's
way, this
funny.
is
Like,
a just
go
real
ahead.
quick, Animal Well, for those who don't know, this is a um 2D side-scrolling Metroidvania-esque. It's not a full-on Metroidvania. It's much more of a puzzle game, but it has Metroidvania elements. It is. like 16-bit or whatever. It's got that aesthetic, which again is not usually my type, but it it's done very well. It's beautiful and it has some really interesting particle effects and things that actually look pretty beautiful for being such a simple game. So that's what this game is. It's like 200 200 megabytes or so. Like it's a crazy small game. Like if you take a video, a
Mhm.
3-second video, it's going to be larger than this game is. It's crazy. So, anyways, that's what Animal Well is. Go ahead with what you were saying.
Yeah, well, two things. First of all, I remember that program. We first started hanging out around high school, and through a
I know
mutual
we got to
friend. And
find it, and I'll email you those codes, and we can
I would love to see it
boot that
because I
up again.
remember one of my earlier like memories of you is like this Levi kid. First of all, talking to me about World of Warcraft and me being like, "That sounds good. I need to get on that." And then the second thing being like, "Look at this," and it was just like a guy on a dirt bike going over these lines. And I'm like, "What are you showing me?" But then it was like fascinating because you'd have all these weird things and like, "Oh, that's cool." It's like, why are you showing me this? But this is really neat. Um, anyway, good memories. But yeah, Animal Well feels like the type of thing you would appreciate. Um, that sounded derogatory. I meant it in a good way.
It sounds like you would like this.
This is the type of thing you'd like. I loved Animal Well. No, so but it is like um, it focuses so much on the puzzles and the exploration and just putting tools in the player's hands and then having a world that is built to be able to handle them just exploring and using those tools in a very satisfying way. Um, and it's funny because this is like 16-bit. It's this old school feeling game. I went into it expecting it to be good because everyone was saying it was good, but I was also kind of like, the first few minutes of it, I was like, okay, this is gonna be charming or whatever, and it'll kind of be its thing. um, I was not prepared for it to absorb me fully for like 2 weeks.
Yeah,
To the I just like would get lost in this game. This derailed me from Stellar Blade very easily. This derailed me from Another Crab's Treasure. I think this could have pulled me off of quite a few other games. It just was so enjoyable to play, and it's kind of ironic that something like Stellar Blade is built to be like this bombastic, these crazy things happening. It's like this seemingly immersive, like the graphics are so good and the
hmm
performance is good. And it's like as a kid I would always imagine like where video games are going is like this hyper realistic thing, and that's going to be the most immersive thing ever, and it can be depending on some stuff. But it's kind of interesting to me that the game I got lost in and felt, it's hard to say immersed because it's like what this is like this weird 16-bit puzzle world, but I was so immersed in Animal Well that like
hmm
I've been dreaming of the sounds, and like you become so familiar with the map and like how you navigate it with all your tools that it's one of those things where
yeah,
I'd play it for a few hours before bed, and then while I'm like falling asleep I'd see myself like running through various areas and like using the yo-yo or like doing whatever. And that's the
yeah.
sign of a good game. But
I think you hit the nail on the head there because that's exactly what I'm thinking about is how far the games industry has come. But at the same time, you look at it and you're like, how far we've gotten away from what makes a good video game sometimes, a lot of the
yeah,
time. All these things, all this effort goes into making games look photorealistic or just things like that. And it's like, you know what? At the end of the day, you can have a 16-bit game like this, but if it's just like, it's the core of what makes a game fun to play is that's what this game does. It just does that. This game would have been good in 1990, in 2000s. It's good
yeah,
today. It'll be good a decade from now. And it was one guy who made it. It's like 200 megabits of storage, and it's just one of the best games. And it's
yeah.
just crazy because it's like that's all you need. And the industry needs to focus more on those core concepts. What makes a game? What makes gaming fun? Why is it
Hmm.
fun? And this game nails that and does nothing um bombastic, as you, I can't think of a better word. Nothing beyond that.
Yeah,
It's not trying to do anything crazy or over the top. It's just a well-made video game where you get to interact with the world and play and
yeah.
explore and discover. I think that's really what makes
Hmm.
gaming
Yeah,
special is discovering, feeling a sense of discovery where someone created something so well that it doesn't feel like, and I do have this problem with a lot of games. All games can feel like a waste of time depending on,
yeah,
if you're prioritizing things right or whatever. It is entertainment, but a lot of games can feel like you are just playing a script. Like
Yeah.
I'm just navigating a predetermined path that someone made, and that can feel like in this weird um existential crisis way, it can feel really like a waste of time. Like this game
Yeah.
could play it's like a robot could play this game, or I could, like it's just I'm
Like,
just
what am
putting in
I?
a series of
I
inputs to go through point A to point B
yeah.
to point C that someone laid out, right?
Yep.
And I think what makes gaming truly special is when someone creates something that doesn't feel like there's a point A to point B to point C. It feels like this giant playroom,
And it
and
makes you forget.
you're just tinkering with stuff. You're just
Yeah.
messing around
You're
and
just playing
exploring
around.
and
Yeah.
having a true sense of discovery. And more games need a true sense of discovery, because I think that is the one thing that this game really nails. When you find a new
Yeah.
object or a new thing, you're like, what does this do? What is the point of this?
Yeah. What do I?
And then you
How
think
do I
you
use
find the
this?
point of it, and
Yeah.
then there's like three other uses for it. It's just,
Dude,
yeah,
there
the
were
discovery in this game is off the charts.
there were multiple items. I don't want to give spoilers because I think this game
Yeah,
is
we'll try and keep
part of
this
the delight
spoiler
is
free,
figuring
because
things out.
yeah, literally the best part about this game is the discovery. So like,
But yeah, like you said,
yeah.
there's certain like there I'll without spoiling very vaguely, like there's a certain item you get that has like a very basic effect you figure out right away that allows you to like do certain things. And then later you figure out there's a lot more nuance to how you can use this item that basically allows you to use it for a totally different thing that I didn't
Hmm.
figure out for like 10 hours. And it was like, oh, this allows me to do this other thing in the world. Um, Either way, ultimately it comes down to like, can I remember that I'm playing a game? Do I forget that I'm playing a game? A lot of video games, like you feel that the hand of the developers, or like you can see behind the curtain a little bit. You're like, I know what you're trying to
Yeah.
do. And that just to varying levels that can pull you out of it. And some of these bigger spectacle games or games with really great combat systems, like those can help you forget a little bit. But I think the purest form of a game is one where your brain is just focused on playing, discovering, figuring stuff out. Um, and you're not even thinking about that. And I think the more you play games and the older you get, the harder it is to achieve that because you've experienced so much and you've seen a lot.
Hmm.
And so when you have a game like this that's so simple that just does it and it takes you away, it's like, wow. It goes to show that if you really understand the fundamentals and the principles of like what makes a game fun, um, that's really all you need. Not that we shouldn't have some of these big spectacles, like those are fun too, but you don't need it.
Yeah. It's amazing how much you can do with very little.
Yeah.
So really, really impressed by this game. It's just it came out of nowhere.
Yeah. Honestly,
I
this is a
forget the name of
contender.
yeah, I forget the name of the developer, but man,
Yeah.
what a developer. I mean, he made an amazing game,
He
pretty
made
much
an
all on his
incredible
own.
game. Yeah.
And the sense of discovery is just one I haven't experienced in a game in a long time, and I wish that more games could hit that discovery
Yeah.
bar that this game hits. Part of that too is the items that you find are not um, predictable. You hop into a lot of Metroidvanias and you're like, where's my double jump? Where's my wall jump? Where's my
Hmm.
dash? And this game, again, we said from the outset, is not, I wouldn't classify it strictly as a Metroidvania, but it has those elements. But every upgrade, quote unquote, that you find or item is like so bizarre and different that you
Yeah.
genuinely are like, what do I do with this?
Like
Like,
you get a yo-yo and it's like, oh cool, like how do I use this?
yeah,
And I won't go into anything more, but I will say is like there's with all of the items, there's the initial basic use where you're like, okay, this immediately will help me solve this,
this
like get
puzzle
me
that
move
I'm
on to this
remembering.
puzzle.
Yeah.
But then later you'll realize, oh, I can do these other things with it that totally different use case. And
Yeah.
but like a yo-yo, you're like, how is a yo-yo going to help me? Oh, it will. And there's a
And
lot
it's
of other
so
weird
it's
things
just
too.
interesting. It's fun to
So
find
interesting.
a new toy or something that is just,
Yeah,
you don't get it immediately and go, oh yeah, I know what to do with this. And if you do, you only know the surface. And that's
exactly.
just,
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah, you'll
fun. The
use
other
it for a
thing I
few
want to
surface
say,
things, and then later you'll be like, "How do I
yeah,
do
yeah.
this?" And then you'll find out, "Oh, if I do this thing, yeah, it's so good."
The other thing I want to say that's a little bit crazy about this game, and it could be a negative, but I don't think it needs to be. There are layers and layers of puzzles in this game. There is the surface layer, which is like, oh, I beat the game. Then there's the next layer. If you're like, oh, I want to do more, you fill out the map, you get everything, you find the true ending. That's a layer 2 of puzzles. Layer 3 is post beating the game. There's more things to find that are much more tricky, and then there's even a layer 4 beyond that, which requires community support and things that, like, there's just not a chance I would have solved in the first place. And that
Yeah.
can create some, I will say that can create some frustration where it's like, I wish I could solve this without help. But then again, maybe I'm just not smart enough. Like it's fine. I
Yeah.
think he did a really good job of layering puzzles, and it's just insane. It's a game about a well. It's insane how deep the well goes. Like
Yeah.
there are puzzles that you wouldn't even know, that most people will never know exist in this game. And so it really rewards if you want to dig in and like just really try and find meaning in everything in this world. It's probably related to a puzzle if you can
Yeah.
figure it out. And
See, I
that's
love that.
both frustrating and really cool.
It's frustrating, but in a way that I like. It reminds me of video
Exactly.
games growing up where one, you didn't really have the internet, or there's you didn't often have access to like figure everything out. But also like some of these games were simpler and they relied more on these puzzle elements because the technology wasn't as good. And I just remember growing up there would be so many things where it's like there were mysteries about a video game that you just couldn't necessarily solve. And then some kid at school would be like, you can break through the secret wall if you do this and you'll find a different path. And then you go try it and you'd be like, what? And it would like
Yeah.
change your understanding of the universe like
There's a lot of that
at
in this game.
large, like. And I haven't had that feeling since I was a kid, I don't think. Maybe with a couple of games, but it's a very rare feeling as an adult, and this game gave me that feeling. Like I felt like I was a kid on summer break, like figuring out new things, and then you'd uncover a secret and it feels like you probably won't ever figure exactly everything out. And I kind of like that. It it's there's
Yeah.
it adds to the mystery of the game, and it helps me feel like it removes that feeling of you're seeing what the game developer is doing, and it's more of just like you're experiencing it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you have the attention span for it, and um you feel like you can make it through any of what we described, this game is, I think it's a must play. It can be beaten in under 10 hours, but there is easily 20 to 30 hours of good content here if you
Yeah.
want to dig deeper. So,
I think I'm at like 17 or 18 hours total, and I beat the main game. I have most of the eggs, most of the like. I think I'm all but one item.
so you're into layer
Um,
2 basically.
I'm in layer two, and I think I'm close to like there's like you said, there's like another ending. I think I'm close to that, but
Yeah.
like you said, there's so many layers. There's one thing I accidentally figured out that I don't even know what it's related to, and it's like okay, I'm not sure what the point of doing this is other than doing it, but
you'll have to
I like spent.
you'll have to share it with me off
I will,
off
but
screen.
like I started doing this thing and I spent like an hour trying to figure out how to do it, and it was like I
That's
don't
how it is.
exactly
You'll
know
get lot.
what
You'll like stumble into something that you're like, is this even? What is this? Do I do this
what
right now? And then you'll spend an hour like working with it,
trying
trying
to
to figure
figure
it
it
out.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's good. I love it. I figured I'd like it from all the praise, and I like puzzles. I like some of these things. I love Metroidvania type elements, but I'm surprised how much I love this. Like this, in some ways, this feels like it could be a Game of the Year contender, which feels crazy stacked up against something like Rebirth. But in some ways, I think this is more deserving, even though Rebirth is like the fulfillment of a childhood dream. Um, I don't know. Animal is great. I don't know exactly what score I'd give it. Probably like a 9.5. Like I think for what it's trying to do, it is like you said a masterpiece, and
Yeah, I
it
think it
it
might be
worked
a
really well
nine
for
and a
me.
half or 10 out of 10 for what
Maybe
it
10.
is.
Yeah, like I don't really have critiques other than this may not be for everybody, and that's fine. Um,
Some things can
I
feel obtuse here and there, but I think we've also we live in a culture with the internet where if something isn't, even for patient people with an attention span, it still impacts us to the point where if I can't figure out a puzzle in 20 minutes or 30 minutes, I'm like, oh, this is obtuse. And
yeah
it's like, I think our bar for what's obtuse has gotten a lot lower.
yeah
Um, some things can feel that way, but I genuinely think that if this game were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we wouldn't even feel that way. Sometimes you have to take a break for a day or two and come back and then, oh, you figured it out or whatever.
yeah
So I think it's darn near perfectly designed,
yeah
and a real surprise on the year. Like I just never would have guessed. Like you said, the first 15 minutes, half an hour, I was like, I don't know if this is going to be for me. It's really not visually, it's not my style. I don't play a lot of games like this. But by the end of it, I was just like, wow, that was a gnarly experience. Like that was
yeah.
just a good game. Just if you like good games and you're not too picky about genre and stuff, this is a good game. Check it out. Not too expensive.
Love it.
That indie
All right,
space
so you
that's
have
just really crushing it these
yeah.
days.
I got to keep an eye on indie. I think that's where we're seeing a lot of these
Yeah.
refreshing things. But
So let's go from a masterpiece in game design to a brand new gacha game.
Glad we saved this for the.
Oh my
This is the
gosh.
true peak of this episode. Is
This
whatever
is the
gotcha
end
game.
game of this episode. No, I
We should
won't I
just have
won't take too long on
a
this.
segment of like what gotcha game is Levi playing right now? Just like a
Oh, yeah,
recurring.
hopefully it's nothing. It should usually be the answer. Um so this month Wuthering Waves came out, which what a terrible name.
Wuthering? Like
Why did we
W.
name a game
Is that a
Wuthering
word?
Waves? I don't know. No idea.
That sounds
Every time I say it, I'm like, how did you name a game that? But anyways,
wuthering.
so I jumped
Yeah.
into this game, brand new gacha
Okay.
game, and it is essentially if Genshin had a baby with Genshin and then it was just Genshin. Like it's basically just Genshin through and through. It is
Right.
unabashedly riffing on just about everything Genshin does, trying to do Genshin but just slightly different, hopefully better is what they're aiming for. It does feel a little bit like for any who know, it feels like a little bit of Genshin mixed with Tower of Fantasy, which was one that came out a year or two ago. Trying to be more different than Genshin, kind of had more of an industrial vibe to it than just straight up natural nature fantasy. Um, this feels a little in between. I would say like 70% Genshin, 30% Tower of Fantasy, but um, I jumped into it. I think on day one, I was like, all right, let me check this out. It's free. Let me download it, check it out. And immediately I was just like, I don't want to learn a new gacha game. Like, I don't want to, all these different, if you've ever jumped into these games, they've got like menus on menus and like events and different places to go to collect this and to collect that and to do
It's a
this. And it's
lot you
just
have
kind
to
of like,
read and figure out.
it's just kind of exhausting. And I was like, I don't think I'm in for this. The performance was a little bad at launch. It's still actually not great. Um, but for some reason, I ended up. What did they do? They did something. Oh, you know what it was? They made it so you could skip story content. And I kid you not, that is probably the biggest reason I don't pick up Genshin anymore. Like I
Interesting.
haven't touched
Yeah.
it in a long time because I swear every single update I don't know who they are employing to write the dialogue in these games, but they have an endless budget and endless amounts of time and it's not that interesting and you can't skip it. And it is just like you will spend all you can think about is how much life you're wasting as you sit there like trying to mash the button to skip through dialogue for literally you'll play for an hour and you'll play for like 10 minutes and you will just be
Wow.
like walking 10 feet and then interacting with this person for like 3 minutes and then do that
In this
again.
day and age, not being able to skip dialogue or cutscenes is like just any
it's
game should
mind
have that. But
it's
especially
mind
something like
boggling to
this.
me in a gacha game where it's like we're really not here for this, you know that,
Yeah.
and you are wasting so much of my time doing this. And so they implemented a skip button and I was like, okay, so I hop back in and sure enough,
That's the feature they
skipping
pulled you through.
skipping through all this dialogue. I don't give a crap about the story or who you're talking to or whatever. I don't care. I'm skipping it. And I've been having fun with it. I actually think it's pretty good. Um, it is what it is. It's not changing, revolutionizing anything, but I do think I like it better than Genshin at this point because Genshin's
Wow.
biggest problem, aside from
Yeah.
skipping story content that you don't want, is the end game. There's no end game in Genshin. You get all these characters that are fun to play. You beef them up. You make them really powerful. You get this team that's efficient and strong, and there's nowhere to take it. It's like having a Ferrari and you're stuck in the garage. Like there's nothing to do
Yeah.
with it. And so it's like, what am I doing? It's catering way too much to the phone side of things. All of the
Mhm.
events that come out are like these dinky little like totally just phone games.
Yeah.
So we'll see what this ends up being. But for now, there's actually fun content. The combat is, first of all, the enemy design in this game is really cool. Like, we talked about Stellar Blade's enemy design. The enemy designs in Wuthering Waves is really pretty dang cool. Like all of the creatures you fight, great design.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that's cool is that like in Genshin, you get artifacts to make your character stronger. That's pretty typical of the genre. In this game, when you fight an enemy, it has a chance to drop what's called an echo, which is basically just a copy of that monster. And those are your relics you equip to characters. So it kind of almost has this Pokemon esque vibe to it, where you're
That's cool.
you're collecting the creatures you fight, and then you're equipping them to
Love
characters to
that.
give them better stats and stuff, which is just cooler. It's just cooler.
That is cool.
Everything is just a little bit cooler. The combat is a little bit more. We throw the word souls around too much, but there's perfect dodges, there's parries. It's a little bit more visceral of combat in that way, where you're interacting with a boss.
Yeah.
And then as far as endgame content, I don't know what they'll end up doing, but right now they have an event that's basically a roguelike event, and you go in with one character, you pick a character, and you go into this completely unique looking space. Like, it looks different than the rest of the game. And you go through a series of rooms like a roguelike dungeon, and you get upgrades and you work your way through it, and you create this overpowered version of your character that has just these insane buffs or changes to their kit. And it's just really fun. Like, it's really cool. It can be challenging, but also it can feel like, man, I've created this unstoppable force of a character. And it's just a really cool, like, it's just so much better
Interesting.
than these little dinky phone game events that Genshin has. So
That actually
I'm
sounds kind
hopeful
of
for it.
cool.
I've been having
Yeah.
a blast with it. Nobody needs to touch this game. As far as wasting your time on video games go, this is probably it. But I do look back on Genshin with a lot of nostalgia at this point. Came out in
Genshin
2020.
was a little fun. Like I dabbled with Genshin briefly, and there are some fun elements to it. So
Yeah, and there's
streamlining
honestly
it and
no
then
game that has combat like Genshin. It is very unique.
yeah,
It can be very good. There's just nowhere to really take the combat. But
yeah,
there are redeeming parts to these games. It still has a gacha system, but I haven't spent any money on the game, and I've gotten, especially at launch, these games tend to give out a lot of stuff.
yeah,
So I've gotten all the character. I got the 5-star character that's like the event character, and he's
right,
awesome. He has like this giant blue dragon ultimate that like destroys everything, and I
nice,
even got his 5-star sword. So I'm running around destroying everything. I'm having a blast with it. We'll see how long it sticks.
yeah,
Again, not a master. We went from Animal Well masterpiece. This is what video games should be, to the antithesis of what video games should be, and yet I still am deriving enjoyment from it, and just
yeah.
hoping that, because you know, part of me wants a game like this completely removed from gacha, and just like, what could anyone make a game like this where you're collecting these characters, and very similar, switching characters, but
I'm
it's
sure you
not an
could.
online gacha system, but no one's
I
ever
mean,
going to do it.
Pokemon
But then
is
also part of the
technically about
fun,
collecting things. Like you could do it.
yeah, part of the fun is, and I hate to say this out loud because it's not,
I know what you're
part
gonna
of the
say.
fun is the gacha system. If it were not monetized, and it were
Yeah,
dialed back in a way where like you could get stuff more easily, get currency or whatever. Like, that is fun. It's fun to like go roll and get a new character and hope you get a new character or whatever. That is kind of fun. It's
yeah,
just that it's like just aggressively tuned to like, here's your 2 pennies, and
yeah.
it's like $10 to for one roller. Like, it's way out of
Right.
balance, way over monetized. That's the problem. But anyways, I'm having fun with it. Terrible name. Free to play. You can play it on mobile and PC for now. Don't
And whether
recommend.
those
Having
waves,
fun with it.
whether those
Dude,
waves
that's
or
what
whatever.
everyone's saying. Like, oh, this game's really weathering my waves. I'm like,
Mm.
hmm.
Withering is a word.
It's funny
I
that you
looked it
fell
up.
upon that on your. It is. Did you look it up?
Yeah, it means like I've already forgotten. Something to do with like wind. Um,
Like an adjective for
yeah.
something that's
So
windy, undulating air currents.
you know what? This is I should have known this is a word. Wuthering Heights is like a classic novel. It's just
Oh
Wuthering
yeah,
Waves. Something about those two words together feels like like it's a really clunky alliteration.
it
Wuthering
is. It's just,
Waves.
it
Like
does not. It's like hard to put in your mouth.
yeah, and it
Not to
feels
phrase poorly, but like,
Wuthering
it just
Heights
doesn't feel good.
flows better like than Wuthering
Wuthering
Waves.
waves.
And it feels weird to have like a word that was used in the 1800s for like your gotcha,
It's so weird.
anime.
We just call it woo wah.
I think that, they just went and looked at a thesaurus and were like, this works. This is good.
They're like, let's look exclusively at the W section and see
Yeah,
what we can
exactly.
find.
We need a worse word for windy.
Oh well,
Mm.
that's what I've been doing. I had a whole mess too with my PC. I had a fun little day with my PC where the fans stopped
It's
fanning
inevitable.
correctly, and I had to break my entire PC apart. And at the end
Yep,
of it, I don't even know what was exactly wrong, but now it's running fine. So
that's how it
that was
goes.
part of my
It's
Wuthering Waves journey as well. Because
yeah.
and then I probably won't talk about this in June, but well, maybe I should. I don't know. I did some DLC prep for Elden Ring,
Okay, okay.
so tried to
Maybe
get my
we'll
character
save that
ready for
because
that.
when does the DLC come out?
The
Is it
20th, 21st, something like
of
that.
this month?
Yeah, no, it's this month.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, let's save that, and maybe I imagine that'll be something we talk about
Yeah, I can talk
next
more
month.
extended. I don't have much to say
Um.
about it, but it was a good
Okay. Yeah.
month. May was good.
Yeah.
Talking about
What
June about May was good.
one last thing about Elden Ring is that I play. So my PC has been in a state of non-functionality
Inactivity.
for like
Two
a year and a
years?
half now, something like that. Um, I played Elden Ring on my PC. So going back to the
Oh,
DLC, I either need to fix my PC, which is a project, like I need
or
to
get it on
drain it, like
PlayStation.
do all sorts of stuff, or I need to like replay it. And I'm not sure. Oh, well, obviously, fixing my PC will be less of a time investment, but yeah. So I have like
And then
I'm
you'll
at a
have a PC.
crossroads.
So,
Yeah. So I
and
think I need to.
let me tell you, it does not run great on PlayStation 5.
Yeah,
It's probably
I
better
know.
than it was, but it does not hit
I do
60.
remember
So,
it doesn't. It yeah. So I'm. It's annoying because I want to play the
well, we know
DLC,
what you're
but
doing for the next 2 weeks.
God, I know. Ugh. Anyway, Elden Ring's coming, and I'm not ready.
Yeah, Elden Ring is coming. Yep. June should be another. This month or this year, just it keeps on, man. We thought 2023 was like
I can't give up.
the pinnacle, the crescendo of all these games, and it's like, man, 2024 is probably going to be barren, and we just can't
It's
keep our
been
head above
crazy.
water here
Well, I know, and I
with
was
all
like,
these
okay,
games.
it's the first half of the year. By August, we'll have Black Myth Wukong, and then it's going to calm down, and we'll get Indiana Jones at the end of the year, and maybe that'll be cool. That's kind of what it felt like. And now it's like, oh, we have Astrobot coming out. It's like I can't keep up. I can't
Yeah,
keep
not to
up.
mention I haven't touched even half of the games from the start of this year, and I still have a handful
Yeah,
left over from last year. So
I haven't started Dragon's Dogma yet. Yeah,
it's tough. It's tough out here, gamers. It's tough.
it's hard. Tough life.
Got to go to work and stuff. Otherwise, we'd have all these games done.
Right. So true.
All right, well that'll conclude June about May, and thank you for joining us. If you're here, let us know what you played. Let us know what you played in May. If you loved it, if you hate it, what you plan to play in June, and we'll be back. We'll catch you in July about June.